The cultural world in which it took place. Right. Because when we remove that first century frame, whether you think you're doing it or not, you're subconsciously putting idea what it would feel like. But we do that because we're trying to understand, but we really need to accurately understand all this. Right. You're still staring at my kids. Anyway, they're all in basketball games and they're having a blast with one of the sisters today. So I get to be here. But there is a time period that is actually not mentioned in the Bible, and it's that intertestamental period, which is unbearable. These are some of the thoughts, right? Daughters are a disaster, a total loss, and a constant potential source of shame. I'm like, look at my girls. It's just the way the world looked at women. Do not sit down with the women, for the moth comes out of clothes and a woman's spite out of a woman. This is a quote. A man's spite is preferable to a woman's kindness. Women give rise to shame and reproach. And women were viewed as temptresses and evil sex objects at this time period. And the kind of thought was to avoid women except for procreation, which is, to produce babies. So, the idea of being free as a woman or respected or loved just for you is just unheard of at this time period. And there are some examples in that time period. A woman named Judith, who was kind of a hero that the apocryphal writings wrote about, but is very few and far between. So when Jesus arrives, this is what's going on. Women are way second-class citizens under men. So the New Testament period, when Jesus comes into the scene, you guys have probably heard he came in during the Roman Empire. And I'm going to show you actually a map. You guys have probably already seen this. And I'm really untechy, so I didn't know how to put these in order. So here we are. But this shows you, look, I have a little pointer. That shows you, I don't even know how you can see, if you can see, the whole Roman Empire. So, of course, there's Spain, Italy, Greece, and Turkey, modern day, and then the northern part of southern Bulgaria today. They had more independence and they had more importance, and who you read about from Macedonia is Lydia. If you remember Lydia in Acts 16. So she just culturally was in an area that women had a little bit more going for them than some of the other places. The island of Crete is down here, and the Cretan women, you can even just see it geographically, they're more separated, right? And so if you're on an island, you're less influenced, right? You're kind of on your own. And so these women were actually a bit ahead of their time. This is the island that the letter to Titus was sent. So when you read through Titus, it kind of makes a little bit more sense. These women were, they had a lot more financial independence, more legal rights. For instance, if their husband died or divorced them, they actually could legally keep their own property. So back then, you weren't allowed to keep your property at all. If there was a sexual offense that a woman was involved in, they also would punish both the man and the woman, whereas before it was just the woman. They coined the term motherland instead of just fatherland. Everybody else always called it their fatherland, but so it's kind of the feminine influence in their country. A lot of their deities, their false gods, were feminine. So the Cretan women were a little bit more kind of modernized, so to speak, than the Athenian and Macedonian women. Then you have, of course, the Jewish women who primarily resided in here like an agent of sensuality. And so hearing a woman's voice, and that's Song of Solomon 2:14. So a woman was never to talk to a man in public. And it was considered like a public display of affection if she talks to her husband in public. It's a little different today, right? A woman's hair, right? Song of Solomon 4:1. If she fastened her hair up, like in pins and kind of fancy hairstyles, that was equated with bathing with another man. And they just looked at it in that same just promiscuous and immoral way. I mean, we read this and we're like, what? But that's where it's important to understand. This is when these things are being written, this is the world in which they're living. The women wore a stola, which is hard to kind of see. It's again, this is a painting, but it's a large sleeveless garment, like an overgarment that the women would wear, and it completely covered down to their feet, and they were completely covered. I mean, they had to move around a lot because they were doing they had to be free to move around, but they had this, and that was a symbol of feminine modesty and a female protection from unwanted attention. So long as she went out with her stola on, it made a huge statement about who she was as a person. And then they always wore a mantle covering their hair. And again, because their hair, if it was seen, it was seen up in such a sensual way in that culture at that time. So they always wanted to have their hair covered. The women left their homes completely covered with the mantle and the stola. Oftentimes even including their lower face, and you do see that at times in some of the modern day Islamic women, right? If she went out without it, her husband actually had the right to put her away, right? If she was caught, and then so much so that if a woman was caught in adultery, then she was forced to remove her mantle and shave her head so that she always walked around showing the shame of what she's done. Wow. So a head covering and clothing and that sense of modesty was huge at that time period. Yeah. Enormous. There actually was a saying, you are what you wear. And I know we say we are what we eat, but we don't even mean that. But they really meant that. They really meant it. They are what they wear. So it mattered. It mattered profusely. I mean, we talk about modesty among ourselves, right? But modesty to them, it was like, what? But also in new roles as physicians, musicians, artists, athletes, and manufacturing. I'm like, wow, I just would not have put prostitution in as a role. But it was one of the things. It just was part of their culture. So again, going back to modesty and dress and appearance, it was huge, the way your image that you presented. So in the Roman Empire at this time, kind of pendulum shift almost from that intertestamental period of oppression, this idea of having a new woman is what the term is, okay? The new Roman new woman, and if you Google new woman, there's just tons out there about her. She is a woman who pursued her own pleasure, her own social life. She had extramarital liaisons as she saw fit, so often even at the expense of her own household. She had greater financial independence, like we talked about, and she could actually even end her marriage and keep some of the dowry. So she had just had this freedom, so to speak, that the other women in these subcultures didn't have. But it was kind of a new movement, maybe kind of like what we would have considered the 60s or something, kind of this revolutionary movement, right? She didn't want it, this got me, she didn't want to spoil her figure with getting pregnant, and she despised the thought of nursing her own child, so she would employ a wet nurse, and that's actually why that was a really common profession. She would employ a woman to breastfeed her own baby. But then she also didn't want to be pregnant, and so oftentimes would have dangerous contraceptions and even abortions back then to prevent pregnancy. So just the female figure was so vital, so important. The new woman, right, when you kind of contrast it to even like the kind of old school, we'll call her the old school Roman lady, would kind of dress more similar to this, like very covered, very modest, okay? So this new woman, in a contrast, she would dress extravagantly. I'm going to show you a picture. Here. Okay. What a contrast, right? Mm-hmm. Neck exposed, hair's all pinned up in this beautiful, elegant, lots of jewels, lots of jewelry. She would dress extravagantly. She would have gold and pearls, expensive attire. She didn't wear the there was sort of a marriage protocol. They would wear a veil, a marriage veil, and that of course would send a very strong message that I'm married, but they wouldn't do it. The new woman was like, down with that, I'm not wearing that marriage veil at all. So they were really kind of criticized for arrogantly dominating dinner conversations. So she was trying to like exercise her female ethos, right? Like, here I am, hear me roar. And she'd interrupt her husband. She'd even correct her husband's like grammatical errors and, oh no, that's not how you say it. I mean, this is this new woman, this kind of coming of age, whatever she is. One of the reasons is this is a Greek goddess named Isis, or Isis. She had a huge influence on women, and she was all about promiscuity and sexuality and sensuality and just being free as a woman and exercising your womanhood. And that was a goddess that was worshipped in the Roman Empire. So even, it's just permeating in the culture, even people who may not even believe in these gods. It just was like, you know how today everywhere you turn around there's an advertisement? Everywhere they turned around there was just this goddess that was constantly shaping the way that they would think about themselves, think about the world. The emperor at the time, Augustus, was like, hold up, this is not good, because it's kind of chaotic to have women like this. So he tried to institute a legislative program to curb these I was trying to think of a really good example, and all I could think of is kind of like, I mean, I'm sure you guys will come up with better examples, and you can think this is my 41-year-old brain. I was like, what if I wore a t-shirt with like a beer can on it? I'm 41, I'm legal, no big deal, right? But it probably gives you an image of me. Yeah. It's not right, it's not accurate, but it's just a beer can, it's not illegal, it's not wrong, right?
Right.
We'll all agree with those things. But it just gives you an image, and so we get that even in our own little level.
Right.
But it was 100-fold, just the idea of what clothes you wore. Mm-hmm. So overall, of course, women during this time were not equal to men, rather. They had a whole lot more restrictions placed on them, and I think why it's important to understand that is that's where Jesus' ministry enters. And so when you see and read about Jesus interacting with women, he's doing it in a culture, my thoughts, higher than your thoughts. And I just love that. I'm like, everywhere you turn through the centuries and the millenniums that pass, God's ways are so different from the world. Mm-hmm. And I love that. And of course that's why we a little bit here about Jesus's ministry to women, and we're going to look at some scriptures. You guys just get your pens out. I had any old way. Write down a bunch of scriptures. We're going to have a chance in a little bit then to kind of break into smaller groups and discuss among ourselves a little bit, and then come back as well. But so you'll get a little stretch break. But Jesus's ministry, very beginning of Jesus's life, who do you find? Who's dominant? Who's the predominant person? Mary. His mom, right? Is Mary. And if you look back at her song, she's in the beginning of Luke, she talks about how the oppressed are going to be lifted up. Those that are belittled are going to be lifted high. And I love that, because I'm like, even from the very beginning, this is Jesus's mom. She must have had this immense impact on the way that Jesus viewed women, because she herself knew I'm lowly, but God is going to lift me up. God is going to do something amazing. It's kind of like a foreshadowing, so to speak. But it's really cool because Jesus had female followers. He had female disciples, and the Bible actually calls them his disciples, which is like so cool. Well, this isn't Jesus, but in Acts you have Tabitha, and she's actually called a disciple, right? Acts 9:36. But Matthew 12. Let me grab my Bible really quick.
Come on, Betsy.
You guys can turn, or whatever is faster. You just listen. Matthew 12:48. You guys know this passage, but it's, you don't see things until, I don't know, I just didn't see this before. It says in verse 48, he replied to him, "Who is my mother and who are my brothers?" And he goes, pointing to his disciples, right? Let's pretend you're my disciples over there. Pointing to his disciples, "Here are my mother," a woman in that group. So, when people are like, "Oh, it's just the men," I'm like, no, it's the women too. They were right there with Jesus. I love that. I'm like, I never knew that. I had to read about that. That's what reading does. It helps you understand stuff. Luke 8, you guys know this about the women, or maybe you don't. It's fine. Luke 8, verse 1. It's after this, Jesus tried. But it says that Mary sat at the Lord's feet. Well, guess who sat at Rabbi's feet? Disciples, men, the students. The women may as well have not even existed in a room back then. They were wherever in the kitchen with the unleavened dough doing their thing. Mary, she's sitting at his feet. And Jesus is just, absolutely, this is where she belongs. She's my disciple. She's my student. She's following me. Again, just culturally shocking at that time. But overall, even when you look at his teachings, we'll look at some of them, they were carefully crafted and deliberately shaped by Jesus to speak to both men and women on the deepest. And this is where the culture, of course, plays a huge role, because we don't shuck wheat and have mustard seeds and things like that, right? That's where you have to engage your imagination to understand the culture a little bit. But in Luke 5:36-39, just write that down, go back, study it on your own, but it talks about the mending of the garment, and that was actually a task women would do, and it contrasts it to the making of wine, which was a task that men would do. So even in that one parable, he's reaching both men and women. I was like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
I did not know that until I started working on this lesson. Did not know that at all. I thought it was amazing. Luke 13:18-21. This is the parable of the mustard seed. Again, men do the farming, but women knead leaven into the dough. So that parable is talking about both of those actions going on. So it was for the ears of the women just as it was for the ears of the men. And he wanted to make sure the women would get his message.
Right.
That it wasn't like, I need to translate this into men's terms. They were like, yeah, Jesus, I got it. Absolutely. The gossip, the slander, who is this guy? Look at him, hanging out with women and blah, 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 all about Jesus, right? He risked his reputation, his credibility, the respect of people. He risked everything just so we as women could know him.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because the Jewish religion, that was not the mindset.
Yeah.
You weren't even allowed to study the ancient literature, let alone have a personal relationship with your God. So Jesus was just amazing. But what we're gonna do, I don't even know the time. Okay, cool. Is we're gonna do kind of split into three different groups, and maybe just break down into like small groups of like 2 or 3 people. And I'm going to give like maybe this table, and this table where Olivia is, John 4, 1 through 42 to look at. And then the back, how about that whole, is that too big? But it doesn't matter. That whole back table along there, and then where Amy is, that row there. Matthew 15, 21 to 28. And then you guys here, 1 Timothy 2, 9 through 15. And what I want you guys to do, just get into like little groups of 2 or 3. There's no right or wrong answers, no right or wrong questions. But just thinking about some of the culture that you guys were presented with, write down some culturally relevant questions to ask of the text that as it pertains to women. So just kind of like get your brain kind of, I know processing is hard, but just to take a few minutes maybe to try to process some of it. Look at that passage and ask yourself some questions. What are some culturally relevant questions to ask of this text? And have someone write it down, and then like in like 10 minutes, a few people from each group can share some of your questions, and then we'll kind of keep on. You guys have any questions about that?
No.
What to do?
Thank you.
Okay. Awesome.
Just not she gives you scripture and then we'll just like break down the questions asked about.
Ask her question?
Yeah. Right?
Yeah, because you're saying not elaborate.
What kind of questions are we writing down?
Read it like, I'm reading this passage like, oh, like asking a culturally like how to.
Okay, I don't know if this is the kind of question you guys. Oh my goodness. The cultural definition, that was the definition that they should not talk about. So how do you translate that to our culture?
Okay, I'll write down the question. So what's our question?
Our culture today.
Are you gonna write it down? Okay, you write it down. Oh, I didn't.
Already started.
You did too?
You did. I already started. You're welcome.
Okay.
So, did you point out the...
Just to clear up any confusion, because I can be confusing, is it's not so much a question that you need an answer to, because I think you have a lot of the answers. It's more kind of, why is this being talked about? What's important about that? Why is this in the scriptures? Why is he talking about that kind of? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect.
Thanks.
You know, as I was reading this, what I was thinking, I think probably asked like,
I read this
you know,
like
the
times.
gospel
I never read
presented to
it
women.
like one I think I was
Of course,
kind
the
of
women part of
like,
it, I think probably what it caused was
didn't say it was
like, oh, okay, well, we
But
have
is that-
you know,
is that
in
literal
the
though?
scriptures and stuff like
Is
that.
that
So,
literal?
you know,
I mean,
all the
then they're
stuff
punishment, but they
outside
have
of
to
it,
work
like,
the
as
week.
far
It
as
would be
like,
hard for them to...
outside, you know, like, do what we want, and I think maybe he should have prepared to like address that, and we also have to be above reproach kind of thing. Like we don't want people to think.
But we do that too now.
Yeah.
It's true.
What is doing or not.
We had to do
You know,
that.
so-
Not fair.
Now we're doing that.
I'm not for women. I don't think it's
What's your name?
Love. What's your name?
Where are you from? Because they didn't want to kids anymore because they didn't want to ruin their bodies.
Yeah. In the campus, but not like in school. Yeah.
And sent into the world.
I am a teacher. I don't know. Okay,
I know the Greek word for save means restored, and so it's almost like you restore someone to a position. It's like, say, if I really messed up, and if I said, keep God, or if I
Also,
prove
a
that I
question like,
did God.
maybe like,
Just kind of like
how can like,
a
how do like the whole idea of like this whole new woman idea, like how could that become a stumbling block?
I don't understand. I don't understand.
Or like stumbling block to like the gospel being presented.
See, this is what I'm saying. My coworker
seems like
being
she's
affected by public Jesus. You're starting to take
I'm just trying to restore it back to what it was before.
Yeah, Dad did a lesson on that.
Yeah, I feel like we all heard.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, this whole premise of this book
Yeah.
is like lessons.
But I feel like, you know how, like, we as a people think that saying, like, Muslim women is something that's coming from God. That's drastic, you know?
So it's the whole idea of Jesus came to set you free, or else you're not slaves anymore.
But I mean, it's not like, to me, I'm like, it's not really that big of an issue. Like, to me, it's like,
Because they just like, wow. It's kind of like we have great systems in it up.
it's not like,
That's great. It's just like, wait, chill. You still can do this,
let's
this,
say
and
if it
that.
were something else, like, not really okay, cover up, like, it's probably not much of an issue in this church anymore.
It's typically in the church. Yeah. So probably in the church he was leaving. He found it. He knew there's women in this church that are going to. One of my questions is what's the demographic of the church that typically went? Like which type of work?
Yeah, because they were like, you know, there's things that going in the matter, so they thought you should have authority over it.
What? Like I know this is a lot of
That makes so much sense to me. So that's my vote again. I'm like,
Gabe would know. Gabe would probably know.
What is?
It's amazing because
I've always wondered, like, verse 15, it says the woman will be saved from childbearing.
So that's addressing what she's saying around like men don't want to become pregnant.
it can also be a hard thing wondering on like I can dress honestly and decency and like not with big hair, gold threads and all that. Because they weren't down by the law, they're like, you can do this and you can dress, and they probably started taking a lot of pride in
So what was the word that was used?
security in the
yeah, he's like, just let that come from within, like,
So
with this
faith
is
can
appropriate
be
for
switch or something can replace for something like the Bible says. So
right. It's kind of like having like every
Probably, are you guys in a, we could probably start back up, or, you know, keep on moving on, keep on keeping on kind of thing, if that works. And you'll have more. I mean, obviously, you go home and keep on asking questions, and keep on thinking, and keep on studying, and keep on reading, and keep on learning, and, you know, I'm not going to answer, you know, obviously, we're limited. And I'm learning. I've only just begun. Just like you guys. So, but one part that was really cool, I just wanted to mention in my reading that I forgot, I jumped over and I was like, this is so powerful about Jesus. There's actually 27 cases in the New Testament of the pairing of men and women, which is cool, like Elizabeth and Zechariah, that kind of thing, okay? But then when you look about the most, you know, the sort of central part of our faith with the cross, the men were there and they were at the crucifixion, right? But the women were in the foreground, so they were still there. But it was the women, and only the women, that were at the resurrection. There weren't even men anywhere to be found. And it's just such a dramatic affirmation of the radical way Jesus views women. He entrusted us with the most essential message to pass on. I mean, if you ever struggle with insecurity, which I do every day, wow, he trusts me. He entrusted this with those women. He's got doesn't even want to be there in the background, none. And I just think that's so powerful. Jesus wanted to wake up the world to how important we are. We're made in his image, so we are so precious to God, for sure. We're gonna start. Just ask like a few of the questions, and then we'll go through. The first one I know is John 4, 1 through 14, and it's the Samaritan woman. I actually have a picture of a well, because I didn't know what a well looked like. So, so I thought it was like wow. I didn't know. I've never been to a well. But do you guys have like maybe questions or things that it makes you think about now? Like, I wonder why, or I wonder.
Did you say 1 through 14 or 1 through 42?
I said 1 through 42.
Okay, good.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Okay. Yep.
John 1.
You got it, girl. Do you have another question?
Oh yeah, we can share.
Okay. That was easy.
I got it.
One of our questions was like, oh, it's not me sitting at the well, Jesus coming out. That'd be amazing anyhow. But it's these women. Yeah, Katie.
Even like that, I was kind of wondering whether that could even come across as insulting to her, as like a seductive move from a man to a woman. Like I don't know how they initiated that. So.
Right. Yeah. Whether that was kind of like he was hitting on her. One would wonder. Yeah. It's not true. I'll just say that. No, but it's good. Yeah. These are because of the cultural significance of that kind of thing. Yeah. I mean, there's so much, right? Go back, study more. But it's that the map I should because I have to go flip. Okay. The map, Samaria is like where it says Cilicia, Antioch. You see Antioch. So just basically this area on the coast is Samaria, and most every Jew would always just kind of walk around. I mean that sounds easy, but walk around Samaria. They wouldn't ever go in because in their minds Samaritans were going to be defiling if they were to touch or encounter a Samaritan. And but Jesus walked right through, right? Because again, what is Jesus looking at? Is our hearts. And Jesus knows defilement comes from within, not simply walking through a place, right? Jesus he goes straight for the straight. So that's pretty cool. But the noonday thing, Middle Eastern women usually would come to the well early in the morning or just before sundown because it's hotter than all get out. It's hot. By the time the noonday sun comes out, it's bright, it's hot. So they avoided that just as a practical reason. Women would usually travel in pairs or in groups. They never would travel alone because they didn't want to be misunderstood, and also just to be protective. They also needed each other to help carry the water jug. Could you imagine? Right. Lindsay was carrying the little water thing. I'm like, but these are like heavy. This is the water for your family. This is like a lot of water. So they just needed each other, just even a very practical thing. But yeah, this woman appears at the well alone, right? We don't have any, I think the Bible would tell us if it was significant someone else was there, but the Bible doesn't say that. And really only bad women do that. Either she was a social outcast from who knows what she's done in her life, or maybe she was looking for a traveler, a wayward man coming on through. This is where Jesus is sitting, where these women are, to greet this woman. He's just there. And culturally, what should have happened is that he kept a 20-foot distance, which is probably from I don't know, Brooke, do you think that's like 20 feet? I don't know, maybe. It's probably, sure. A good sizable distance. But Jesus doesn't do that, right? Because he's not governed by the laws of the world. He comes in and he sits and he greets her, which is, again, she's a Samaritan. She's a woman. Remember what we learned? Women, if you talk to a man, that's just outrageous. So she's uncomfortable. She's like, this is confusing, right? Who is this guy? This is confusing. What does he want from me? Is he a wayward traveler? I don't know what she's thinking. We don't really know. There's no witnesses. You know how important a witness is in a case, right? Oh, I know they didn't do anything wrong. That's why we go on double dates in the kingdom, right?
Amen.
Keep us pure. If you're by yourself, there's nobody there to vouch for you, right? Nobody there, no witness. But this is all Jesus's plan, right? He's very deliberate in what Jesus does. There's other wells and other people and other situations, but he breaks these social rules. He talks to a woman. He ignored this 500-year-old hostility thing going on between Samaritans and Jews. He just ignored it. 500 years. That's enormous. That's longer than the United States has been around, right? But this is something I love. He actually puts himself in need of her, right? He deliberately forgets his jug or sends it along with the disciples. He doesn't have anything. And I love that. And, what does it do to somebody when you need them? How does that other person feel?
Important.
They feel validated, important.
Endeared.
Yeah, whoa. So here she is. For whatever reason, she's there. She is not high on a totem pole, right? She's a pretty lowly woman, and here Jesus is like, I actually really need your help. You know, I mean, he validates her as a woman. He validates her as somebody deeper and bigger than whatever all the mistakes and stuff and choices that she's made so far in her life. I love that. You know, he elevates her self-worth, right? She knows you have something to give. Everybody has something to give. I think about that reaching out to people, how often we can be one-sided, like it's me giving to you, me giving to you. But man, there's people, they have great things to give back and to help me with. I mean, it takes me 4 children to have before I realize how much I need people, but I need people to give. I need people to help me, and we all need to be needed.
Like something for them?
Yeah.
So if I was a Gentile, like, what was the significance of her being one of the first to, have faith as a Gentile instead of an Israelite?
Yeah, that's really good. That's really insightful, thoughtful. Yep.
Along with her question, or what she said, with being a Gentile, we kind of were wondering, Jesus came to save everyone, like there was no difference. So why was it, or what was the reasoning for why he talked to her the way that he did, or said what he said?
Yeah, isn't that the passage you just kind of want to, let's move on? I don't know. That's why I brought it up. That's why I picked it. Yeah, nope, it's a good question. Yeah. Anyone else? Other kind of questions about it? Yeah.
What was that woman's reputation, and did she know Jesus would heal her?
Yeah, what was her reputation? Did she know Jesus would heal her? Yeah, that's great questions. Very, very good. Because she was Gentile, right? This Syro-Phoenician area. My map. It's isn't that terrible? It's funny. Does it even show up on here? I feel like it did when I looked at it earlier.
Probably trying to load because you went so fast.
I know, right? I put it off. No, but anyhow, I believe it's like part of the Turkey area. This Asia Minor, Turkey, however you want to. It's a Gentile province. It's not Hebrew in its origins at all. So they were considered to be non-believing people. But the message of Jesus was still spreading, right? The message was out there. People would hear of Jesus and come follow him. Like, who is this guy? You read about that in some of the gospel writings, right? So it could be that she'd heard of him and knew, I need to ask this man for help because this guy can help me. Because there's some reason. I mean, she must have known that he could help her. She wouldn't have come up to him. This is a painting. It's, a painting. But it kind of just shows her, like, there's all these needs around her, and she's like, I'm just coming to you, Jesus. I'm just going to fall in front of you. Why didn't I look at my notes? All right. Phoenicia is on the northern west coast of Palestine. Okay, so it's above, it's kind of like where Turkey came in this before it goes down to Israel. Makes sense? Can you flip back? Okay. So this is what's interesting. Get this, Jesus is rude. Where does this come together with God is loving and all the, because to us, that's rude, right? That's not how we treat one another. Except if you're my child and I go, hold on a minute. But at least I acknowledge. But Jesus didn't, right? He didn't acknowledge nothing. So it was culturally accepted. Nobody was there sitting going, oh, he didn't respond to her. No, because he's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, actually, as a Jewish man in that time period. But he was giving her a really tough test, and this is something I didn't ever really think about, right? Is we look at it, we're like, oh my gosh, he ignored her, then he insulted her, and then he kept on doing it. Oh my goodness, and suddenly she has faith? Where'd that come from, right? But he knows our hearts, and he knew who she was, and he knew what she could handle, and he never gives us more than we can handle, right? He gave her a test not just for her, but for everybody around her. Here she is, a woman who came to Jesus in great need. It's interesting, though, because the scriptures say, have mercy on me. My daughter is so sick. I was like, wow, it's not have mercy on my daughter. She said, because it's anguish for a mom to go through something like that. I mean, she's pleading for absolutely everything, for her daughter, for herself, for everything. She traveled however with Jesus and risked being publicly humiliated, risked everything just to talk to him, right? So he knew she had something. He knew this woman is serious because she would not have done all that stuff. She just didn't talk to me like that if she didn't have something to say, something important, right? But he knew her. So You know, if anybody's ever done athletics in this, had a coach in your life?
Yeah.
Katie's like, no?
Really?
Yes. Yeah. A good discipler? Okay, anyway, but a good coach knows to put a good runner in a good race, right? A coach isn't going to put you in the lamest race possible. They're going to push you. They want to see what you've got. What are you made of when the rubber meets the road?
Yeah. Right.
You think about Jesus thinking about that with this woman. I'm going to see what you're made of. What kind of faith do you really have? What kind of determination do you really have? She absorbs his insult. She is focused, right? This woman, someone was asking, how do we know her faith? Well, she was willing to endure a public humiliation in order to get what she knew only Jesus could give her. She's like, only Jesus can do this. I don't care what is going on. I was just called a dog. Now, evidently, like, the text actually means he called her a little dog, which was kind of like a joke in a way. Like, you're not really as their hearts exposed what was really going on in their minds. Because he's got this audience. It's not a woman that he is instructing and teaching, right? But then it's so cool at the end, he elevates her because she passed his test and she's commended publicly. And her faith is written about in the Bible. Everyone knows the Syrophoenician, the Canaanite woman, a woman of great faith, right? So she endured that test to what? To be completely elevated, publicly lifted up. Here she is a Gentile. Jesus is praising her in front of all of these other rabbis and religious people. You are a woman of faith. That's powerful. You know, that's amazing. That's like being around all the religious world of today and Jesus going, but actually you, the most unlikely, the least of all, because you just came with all that you had, you're the one with great faith.
Yeah.
All the rest of you got it all wrong. I mean, that's what he's saying to the crowd. So much bigger. But we're going to, because I think, okay, we're going to keep moving on. Pauline letters. So 1 Timothy 2, that scripture. How about two people share some stuff, questions or thoughts? Yep.
Two questions that we came up with were, what were some of the topics that were being brought up?
Yeah.
How were those topics becoming stumbling blocks to people becoming Christians? And then another was, obviously, Paul is writing a letter to Timothy. What was the demographic or the ethnic typology of Timothy's church,
Yeah.
like of the women specifically? Were they Roman? Were they Jews? Were they,
Yeah.
which kind of, were they a blend? Like, what kind of demographic was his church?
Right, who he was, his audience. Mm-hmm. Yep. You guys have any other? Do you mind closing it? Because I really don't want the brothers to
We were thinking about, is Paul saying basically that the whole new women idea is just not pleasing to God, so it should be kind of cut out? Or then also, like, why did Paul have to say these things to Timothy? Like, maybe did some women get entitled when Jesus came in and kind of rocked the boat, or were they like arrogant and outspoken, like in an ungodly way, women that he was trying to like prepare him for? Like, why did he have to say those things to Timothy?
Yep. Yeah, it kind of brings up a lot, because if you don't understand any of the cultural world, you read that stuff, planet Earth, weird, right? No braided hair, okay, don't braid my hair. I mean, and you know that there's people out there that actually will, in their faith, say you can't wear jewelry, you can't do. So it's good to understand these scriptures where in holiness is paramount. And to Paul, it was just as important. He didn't want someone to confuse you coming to church as a prostitute. Yeah. Right? He didn't want you to come to church and someone say, oh, she's just like that new woman. She's just, they're no different, right? Because the culture at that time, it was such a reaction that it was almost like a rebellion, right? Of what, not that we can. So if a woman's starting to argue in front of church and correct men, it was, oh, she's that woman. It's this whole image that she's presenting. If she came in not wearing a head dressing, Paul's not saying you can't do that. But in that culture at that time, man, they're going to think something. And it's not good if you come in that way. It's kind of like my little beer t-shirt. If I walk on it, I mean, really, just not helpful for building up the kingdom. I mean, it's not, why? I don't need to wear my beer t-shirt. And I had lots of those things when I became a Christian. Lots and lots and lots and lots of those things that I had to just, this is not useful. This is not helpful. This is not beneficial. This could be a stumbling block for someone's faith one day. I don't get it. Maybe it doesn't affect me. Maybe some of these women were like, this doesn't affect me. But if it affected someone else's faith, isn't that important too, right? And we need to think in those terms. And Paul was thinking as this great leader of the churches as a whole, not always one specific person, but what's good for God's church? What's good for God's people? Kind of jump a little bit. He was a Roman, he was a Pharisee, man, he understood culture. He was both of those things. He really understood what would be a stumbling block, what would hurt somebody's faith. He understood all of it, but he wanted to protect the image of women the way that God defines our images, not the way the world does, right? I think I mentioned this often. How often do we make judgments by what we see on the outside when people come in? I mean, just, that was the world. They came to church, and Gabe did this lesson on modesty a few years ago. I'll never forget it, because I have in my mind what modesty is. We don't have time for this whole lesson on modesty, but I have my, the mini skirts and the short, whatever, right? But actually it was not coming in and drawing attention to yourself. Right. Wow. So that's the idea of being modest, is dressing like the people. Just not the world, but just, you don't want to stand out. You don't want attention. But they were such a classist system that if they came in with fine jewels and stuff, they were wives, women, widows. The appearance of new women in the Pauline communities. That's a really long title, isn't it? The author is Winter, Bruce Winter. So probably if you go on Amazon, look under Bruce Winter, Roman wives, Roman widows, that kind of thing. It'll come up. I just wanted to conclude with this. So be confident, all right? Be confident that God has chosen you. You might be your Lydia. He converted a whole church just from one woman, right? Jesus believes in the women's ministry. He wants the women's ministry. Be confident that you are a woman in the women's ministry. Maybe you're the only sister in your Bible talk. Maybe you're the only sister on your campus. It doesn't matter, right? God has chosen you to know him deeply and personally, and he's entrusted you with his very, very special message that he knows that you can understand in a way that other people, that the brothers just can't understand. Or maybe you're like the woman at the well, and he's like, I know everything. I've given you my entire message. And she turned around and blew it away for Jesus, right? Told them everything many people became Christians, followers of Jesus after her testimony, right? She shared with everyone. But all she did was she knew Jesus and she shared that. So if you walk away from this whole class New Testament survey, you've learned 5,000 million gazillion facts and awesome things. The end of the day, you know Jesus and you share Jesus. You will change the world, and be confident in God's choosing of you. Don't shrink back from sharing your faith with all people. All people. Men, women, everybody, right? Don't shrink back and doubt your worthiness. Jesus doesn't. He knows he needs us. He's chosen us, right? Strive forward to continue in the revolutionary call of following Jesus, and don't stop. Don't stop until your last dying breath. All right? Amen. I love you all. Thank you. I don't know what to say after this, except if it stops raining, welcome to Roanoke. And it's really a beautiful city with beautiful mountains surrounding it, and this really cool place called Mill Mountain Star. And it's on top of a mountain, and you get this whole panoramic view. So if it clears up tonight, that would be awesome to go to, or tomorrow after the whole session. It's really beautiful, and it's free.
Oh man, I'm learning. It's not easy at all.
Really quick, guys, someone left this in the bathroom. My favorite. I'll leave it right
So at one point, I almost knocked Passover coffee and
What did I see?
it was like it was all the way.
Okay, so an hour 20 and I did an hour 15. Maybe less. Yeah.
No, the one
Thank you. I don't have a car, so that's a little tricky.
I mean, people probably come back.
There's a party after dinner.
What?
We know the Lord liveth, and blessed be the rock.
We should go back to my
Okay. Thanks. Real quick, yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it's like the same distance. Like, yeah, you're in the same state, but like it's the same distance as Virginia Tech was. So.
I think that was MTP.
Oh, okay.
Oh, because they do talk about it in here, so that makes sense. So for you, I'm glad we got to sit next to each other.
I need to talk to Amy. I need to talk to Amy.
Thanks for taking the trip.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm so grateful for these things. Oh!
You are like a juice smoker, aren't you?
Right. But I'm part of it.
Like not even a little bit more. No, like a little bit more. No, a lot more.
She really makes it really hard.
Yeah, I mean if it wasn't so far.
Yeah, right. Yeah, where you have your dog at that's what do you do? I hope the brothers can finish soon so I can ask them if they were to take me. They're like talking. Oh, now I gotta go.
Yep, go catch it.
It's just not easy to find whereas acrylic, that's 6 months.
It's like I would be so frustrated all the time.
Yeah, I do it.
I actually met several person.
Couldn't tell you to them with the dating, the speaker, cute thing.
Yeah, she claims that this is true. They met.
And you were doing it.
Yeah. They were shutties.
Yeah.
That's why I was like, can someone take that off?
Oh yeah, they probably hearing the deep conversations.